First, thank you. Thank you for inviting Barozzi Veiga tonight. It's a pleasure to be here and have the chance to talk about the Tanzhaus. The Tanzhaus is the last building that we have finished in our office. I mean, it took 5 years to finish it, but somehow I think it's a great sample to explain you not just the building, because the building is a very simple building. It's not a huge intervention, but it's a great chance to explain you the ideas that we have when we were doing this building in our office somehow. This is the context. This is Zurich. I mean, far beyond the idea of the lake and far beyond the city center somehow. But it's a neighborhood that is characterized by this industrial mood that you can see here. The bridge for the trains, this sequence of warehouses. Somehow it's fragile, it's delicate, and somehow it's something that we wanted to preserve with our intervention. The Tanzhaus, the brief, described the project as somehow a sequence of 4 studios for dancers, a small area for administration, and the secondary uses for dancers, the restrooms, I mean the cloak rooms, changing rooms, sorry. And so the brief was describing basically the uses, but it was not describing somehow what they wanted to get with the building. When you are an architect, you always have in mind, of course, I mean, how to solve all the issues that you have to face. I mean, how to face with the program, how to face the constraints, I mean, the budget, I mean, with everything. No, that's part of your job. And being from abroad as us in Zurich, I mean, we were conscious that we had to solve those issues and we had to propose something that for us it's very important. We needed to be specific on the site where we were working. That's your job as architect, to be specific on the sites where you work. And that's something that we knew. But at the same time, our approach needs to offer always something personal somehow. We used to call it sentimental, but well, an approach that allows us somehow to transmit things with the buildings that we do. And this is something that the sketch is trying to describe. There is a moment that something personal appears always. Because to deal with the context is, in this case, was to deal with, I used to call them the family members. I mean, this primary school here, the building that we have to extend it, I mean, the existing Tanzhaus, and this housing block at the back. So we thought that, at the beginning we thought that we didn't want to do a building, we wanted just to propose a kind of emblematic public space somehow. And that's why, well, we tried to deal with the playground of the primary school. We wanted to extend the pathway close to the river. We wanted to propose a nice garden where somehow the buildings could compose an ensemble. We were dealing with the physical context somehow, and that was quite useful. But to be specific means something that goes beyond the idea of the physical fact somehow for us. We were conscious that to find the right answer in a place is not just to play with the physical elements. We wanted to somehow achieve the right character or the right attitude of this building. And that's something really important for us as architects. I mean, try to find the right character of the work we do. And in this case, well, we composed the building just trying to reduce our movements to the minimum. I mean, just proposing a couple of walls that could somehow define this kind of plinth for the ensemble of buildings that we have at our back, and characterizing these walls through these elements. The sequence, again, like in our neighborhood, the repetition of an element, an industrial element somehow. And this is how the building appears. It's just 2 walls, stepped back, trying to control what we call the fundamentals. We play with the fundamentals always. We play with the idea of, we are architects. So we play with scale, proportion, light. And we wanted to, control these items, these issues. And we wanted to somehow generate a background for what was in front of us. This greenery somehow that was characterizing always the appearance of the building. And we tried to reduce, as I said before, the movements to the minimum. We decided to build everything just with concrete, with recycled concrete, trying to understand all the elements that were composing a building. A building can be an endless history, but in this case, we wanted to just expose totally the construction of the building somehow. So we tried to reduce as much as possible the materials. We wanted to reduce somehow all the elements that are always faking somehow what means a space when you build something. And we started to play, with this idea of the walls, this stepped structure somehow, and what was a wall in Zurich. And what's a wall in this context? Well, of course, it's a public building. And it's a public building that needs to express somehow its presence into the city, needs to scream somehow, needs to declare that something is going on there, and needs to somehow transform this place in a new social space somehow, needs to attract visitors. And this is what we try to do with this repetition of elements. Then of course it's not just, of course it's a desire, because we are architects. It's something that we wanted to do. It's an obsession somehow. But it's not just an ornament. It's an element with meaning. I mean, these walls are facing south, so the triangles help us to to achieve a good balance of openness and closeness, this 50-50% that we had to achieve. It's an element that allows us to introduce all the technical requirements that we had to solve somehow, that introduced the idea of how to filter the sunlight, how to control the energy that enters into the building through the idea of trying to come back nature into the building, proposing somehow that plants and flowers can control the sunlight from the exterior, and the building appears, as a background of this nature somehow. So it was not just an egoistic decision. It was a decision with meaning for us, because for us, architecture needs to have meaning by itself. And this is Zurich in 2019. Somehow the building is not a building, it's a landscape. And it's a landscape, and we like to call it landscape because it belongs to this place, belongs to this landmark. I mean, well, this is the silo in Zurich. I mean, this is the highest building in Zurich. But well, the building plays with this landscape because it belongs to this landscape. This is something that we wanted to do since the beginning. And this idea of landscape appears just from the top of the building because the building looks back to the city, tries to recover the importance of the city, tries to show and to rediscover how the city works in this neighborhood. At the first level, where the offices and the dancers' areas are placed, I mean, the public space extends its importance in front of them, trying to combine the playground of the school and trying to combine the daily life of the offices. That's why the public space appears in this level. And inside the building, somehow it explodes. Of course, it's a building that tries to reflect about these typical issues that the architects always have in mind. I mean, mass, gravity, light, how to work always with the same material, not because we were obsessed with recycled concrete, but because we wanted to focus attention about the space itself and not about all these accents that are always characterizing some of the main architecture that we are used to see. How the offices are characterized, but a repetition of elements that are always the same but always different because the flowers and the plants are always characterizing somehow your own landscape when you are into the building. And how somehow the light can transform and can shape in a different way a simple space as this just through facing south. At the ground level, I mean, appears The main uses appears the studios for the dancers, and the main room where the performances and the plays are used to run every week. And at this level, I mean, the buildings shows another kind of scale, becomes more human somehow. We increase the pathway close to the river. We just put a bench here, trying to activate the life in front of the building, trying to activate somehow, trying to blur somehow the limit between exterior and interior. And here appears the foyer, the lobby, the main lobby, the space where the interior and the exterior is totally blurred, and where somehow the walls, this endless sequence of triangles that are characterized in this atmosphere, transform the space into something that introduces movement, light, shadows, something that is constantly changing. And somehow we always had in mind the idea that to build a couple of walls for dancers should be something different than to build a couple of walls for an office building. And that's why we were reflecting about somehow an architect struggles in the same way than a dancer with gravity. And we thought that somehow the way you touch the ground should be different. And that's why here the triangles are trying to touch the ground in a different way. And that's why the shadow, the light, the rhythm changes day by day, season by season. And everything filtered through these ideas. I mean, somehow the space appears complex but simple at the same time. Everything solved with the same material, and everything trying to somehow hide the complexity of the world that is surrounding us. Because to build, most of you know that to build is something very complex. These are one of the smaller studios. I mean, just a simple space characterized by light, always having in mind that it's in a space for users. It's not in a space for architects. It's a space for dancers. The main room, we didn't want to propose an over black room somehow. We wanted to introduce light. We wanted to characterize this room not just through our architecture. We wanted to characterize this room through these fundamentals as I was describing you before, and trying somehow to solve all the technical issues in a simple way. I mean, how to play with acoustics, just inclining a little bit this wall, trying to avoid the parallelism, how to somehow play with the essence of the space. Here you can see the contrast between what was a wall and what's a wall for us in this building. And this is how the building appears from outside. I told you that it was a good sample for us because it describes the way we understand architecture nowadays. I'm not sure about the next years, but somehow it's a building that tries to, it's not a Swiss building somehow, it belongs to this place. I think that it's a building that tries to rediscover somehow the character and the identity of this place, tries to propose a new reality. That is something that we always are looking for. And mostly tries to filter the idea that we had about architecture when we faced this place. I mean, an architecture that most of the times tries to find a balance between the idea of intimate and monumental. Monumental, understand the monumental as something that can transmit things, something that describes a link between past, present, and future somehow. And an element, a building, that proposes that the public space, a public building, has its importance into the city because it's what makes the cultural life can somehow build society. Thank you very much.